Just a few years ago, there was a point where it looked like Oregon State might have become one of the better teams in the Pac-12. They were under Jonathan Smith, who had been a quarterback for the Beavers back in the day from 1998 to 2001, and the team had gone from 2-10 in 2018 to 10-3 in 2022. They finished ranked number 17 in the country and were 5th in the Pac-12. They were a team that was bigger than the sum of its parts though, with freshman quarterback Ben Gulbranson taking over for Chance Nolan halfway through the year and finishing with less than 1,500 yards and 9 touchdowns and 5 picks. They had some really great players on that team like Damian Martinez at running back and Omar Spates, but there really wasn't any star power on the team, so you knew it had everything to do with coaching. But jump 3 years into the future, and Jonathan Smith looks like he's about to be fired from Michigan State. Damian Martinez got drafted into the NFL after being at Miami, and Trent Bray, who was the defensive coordinator in 2022, got fired as the head coach at Oregon State after starting out 0-7. Oh yeah, and Oregon State is one of just 2 teams left in the Pac-12 after all the other major brands left them. They were stuck with Washington State, and things have been a total downfall since 2022. In today's video, we're going to take a look at what has happened to Oregon State football and try to figure out why they are so bad and how they got to this point. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the downfall of Oregon State football. Okay, so to start this video, we have to talk about conference realignment because that's really at the heart of every change that has happened here. Oklahoma and Texas's move to the SEC had a lot of responses in college football realignment, and it all started with USC and UCLA announcing their moves to the Big Ten to create the other super conference in college sports. This almost instantly destabilized the Pac-12, and instead of banding together and adding more schools like the Big 12 did, they just completely collapsed. There was a lot of boardroom drama and misinformation that came around at this time period, but no matter what actually happened in those rooms, Colorado jumped ship to the Big 12, and then pretty soon after, Oregon and Washington jumped to the Big 10, and then the last death blow was Arizona, ASU, and Utah joining the Buffaloes in the Big 12. Immediately, this had a huge effect on Oregon State. Now they'd have to reorganize the conference alongside Washington State, Cal, and Stanford, but then Cal and Stanford made that option harder as they decided to join the ACC, leaving just Oregon State and Washington State behind. Without getting invitations to the Big 12, both of these teams were pretty much demoted outside of the Power 4 status, and this had huge repercussions on their brands. Since they were no longer conference teams receiving Power Conference payouts, their NIL capabilities shrunk considerably, and the image was gone. In order to fill out their schedules, they formed a tentative scheduling alliance with the Mountain West, so they were basically Mountain West teams at that point. Jonathan Smith, who you remember was an alum of Oregon State, saw the writing on the wall and didn't really have a choice. He wouldn't be able to compete at the same level both monetarily and talent-wise, so he shocked the world by deciding to jump ship to Michigan State. He left Oregon State without a head coach for the 2024 season, and since it would be really difficult to hire someone, they decided to elevate Trent Bray to be head coach because that would keep a lot of the coaching staff together and maybe offer some stability. But the problem was that it didn't keep a lot of other things together at Oregon State. Most of the coaching staff ended up leaving for MSU with Coach Smith, and some of the players decided to jump ship as well. Like I mentioned before, Damian Martinez was the leading rusher for that 2022 team, and he came back in 2023, but with the Beavers essentially demoted to non-Power 4 status, he entered the transfer portal and was one of the biggest names at running back in the portal for that year and ended up going to Miami. He ran for about 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns before being drafted in the 7th round by the Seahawks. He was a talented player that had to go away. Aiden Childs was another player that Oregon State lost to the portal, as in 2023, they had brought in DJU to play quarterback for them, and he'd done a pretty good job for them, considering how the rest of his career turned out. He threw for 2,700 yards and 21 touchdowns, but Coach Smith had a prized recruit in Aiden Childs, who was a 4-star recruit coming out of Downey High School in California. He had thrown for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns as a backup in 2023, but he was the future of the team and played very well for the Beavers when he was in. But instead of staying, he followed Coach Smith to East Lansing to be the Spartans' starting quarterback in 2024. Their leading receiver in 2023, Silas Bolden, transferred to Texas in 2024, and the whole team pretty much fell apart overnight, all because Oregon State lost their place in the Power Conference world. That was seen pretty much immediately in 2024, as they went from 8-5 in 2023 to 5-7, and the entire team regressed. Their offense went from scoring 32 points per game in 2023, which was good for 35th best in the nation, to just scoring 24, or 95th best in the country. Their defense went from allowing 23 points per game to allowing 30, which made them the 35th worst scoring defense in the nation. And remember, they weren't playing normal Pac-12 opponents. they regressed against worse competition. After starting 2024 with wins against Sacramento State and San Diego State, they got blown out 49-14 by Oregon. After barely scraping by Purdue and Colorado State the following few games, they went on a streak of 5 straight losses, including being shut out 28-0 by Air Force, who finished with a 5-7 record. They did manage to beat Washington State 41-38 to keep their bowl hopes alive at 5-6, but then they had to travel to number 11 Boise State to take on Ashton Genty, and they lost 34-18 and missed a bowl game in year 1 under Trent Bray. There was some hope that they would be better in 2025, but the hits kept coming. 17 more players entered the transfer portal after the 2024 season, including starting receiver Jeremiah Moga, who left for Washington State. Edge rusher DJ Wesselock ended up going to Missouri State, and quarterbacks Ben Gulbranson and Giovanni McCoy ended up leaving for Stanford and Temple. Gulbranson had been in the quarterback room since 2022, and McCoy was an FCS standout at Idaho before he came to Oregon State. He started 9 games, throwing for 1,300 yards with 3 touchdowns and 6 picks. They also had former Mizzou transfer Jabari Johnson. They started the year with a loss to former Pac-12 foe Cal 34-15, and then lost a heartbreaker to future Pac-12 mate Fresno State 36-27. After that, they went on the road to take on number 12 Texas Tech, who had the opposite portal experience to Oregon State, and they got killed 45-14. They then went to Eugene and got obliterated by Oregon 41-7, and then they had their best opportunity when they hosted Houston from the Big 12. But they found new ways to lose again, as despite leading 24-10 with just 6 minutes left in the game, Oregon State let Connor Weigman and Houston run down the field and score a touchdown, and then with just 3.5 minutes left in the game, they played poor coverage, and Houston tight end Tanner Koziel scored a 50-yard touchdown to tie it. They failed to score a TD in overtime, and a Houston field goal won the Cougars the game. They followed up that game with a 4-point loss to Appalachian State, and then with a 25-point loss to Wake Forest, before finally having enough of Trent Bray, and they fired him as head coach. They did get that coach fired bounce back though, as they ended up beating FCS Lafayette a week later, but they won't make a bowl game no matter how good they play from here on out, and it was looking dicey that they'd even win another game. Somehow, some way, they ended up beating Washington State 10-7, and then this past weekend, they hit a new low. They ended up losing to Sam Houston State, who you could make an argument was a bottom 3 team in all of college football. The Bearcats are currently 1-8, and their only win has come against the Beavers. I mean, they are absolutely horrible. This is definitely a low point for them, and the additions they made in the offseason just haven't really done that much. They brought in Malik Murphy from Duke, and so far he's thrown for 1,700 yards with 9 touchdowns and 8 picks. Anthony Hankerson has been a bright spot as he's already rushed for nearly 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns, but his talent is being wasted, just like Trent Walker, who's also near the top of college football with 56 catches, but somehow he doesn't have a touchdown yet. So Oregon State got their legs kicked out from underneath them by realignment, and they have not been able to stop the bleeding. They're in a terrible situation right now, and you could say that's not the reason why they're playing so poorly, but Washington State is also having a similar season. Oregon State somehow managed to beat the Cougars, and this is the same Washington State team that lost by 49 against North Texas. While many would argue the Cougs are a better team, they ended up losing face-to-face, but it's safe to say no matter what, Washington State's probably in a better spot because they hired Jimmy Rogers, the former South Dakota State coach, and it looks like he'll probably get things figured out at some point. Honestly, looking into the future, that's the route that Oregon State probably needs to take. I know a lot of people are talking about Coach O coming to Corvallis to lead the Beavers, but I think they need a coach who wins a lot with less. They could go the Dakota route and try and hire Tim Polasek, the head coach at North Dakota State, but I think the best move would be to hire someone like Brett Vegan at Montana State. The Bobcats made the FCS national title game last year and always have special seasons, and Vegan has won over 50 games as a head coach in a pretty short period of time. Things look really bad for the Oregon State program right now, and there's a lot of ways it can get worse for the Beavers. But with the new Pac-12 conference coming into form, I think there's an opportunity to create a new niche for themselves as one of the premier teams in the Pac-12 if they can get their new hire right. A coach that consistently has them with Boise State and Washington State at the top of the conference could keep them performing at a high level, maybe get them back to a power conference status someday. But that is dicey. There are many other schools who offer more than Oregon State, as besides formerly being a Power 4 school, they don't have great basketball, they aren't located in a huge TV market, they haven't had a ton of past success, and are also one of these smaller fan bases. Personally, I've always loved the Beavers as I think they have a great color scheme, and I love the Beaver mascot, but Oregon State probably is a long ways away from being a contender again. They would pretty much have to win for a couple of years at the Mountain West level and completely dominate to really have any sort of hope of going back up to the Power 4, But maybe Oregon State takes a different approach and hires one of those big-time coaches that does more with less and tries to have them compete for that Group of 4 playoff spot every year. I mean, that is probably their best route right now, as even if you put them in the Big 10 or the Big 12, they probably aren't competing anytime soon. But either way, Oregon State went from a respectable team under Jonathan Smith to now falling apart, and it's sad that he's also fallen apart at Michigan State, and things have just turned out poorly for everything Beaver related. But what do you guys think? If you're an Oregon State fan, what has gone wrong with the program? How do you fix it? And what other school should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.